Hey guys, what's up? This is Chris from Utah, and I'm just drinking a 2022 raw puer from Gulanghe in Monghai County. Uh, this is the first series. This is the first episode of hopefully an ongoing series about where I talk about teas and stuff I have on the store, and maybe other stuff in like Agriwood or something related to tea. But anyway, today I want to talk about young raw puer. I think this tea is very unique unto itself. Because it's not a tea that's upfront. Meaning that when you drink the tea, you're not going to be overwhelmed by aromas and flavors. That's not the characteristic of young raw puer, or just puer in general. If you want something that's really fragrant, something that has a very strong flavor profile, I would recommend drinking oolong teas. Taiwanese Hainan oolongs, yan cha, dancongs, they all have super fragrant flavor profiles. Young raw puer, however, does not. It's actually, young raw puer has its flavors, has its aromas, but it's pretty restrained, right? It's not gonna punch you in the face like those other, like oolong tea will. But why do we drink then raw puer? If it doesn't have such a upfront flavor that we can feel, then why is this such a highly sought after tea? Well, I think the reason this tea is highly sought after is because it goes deeper than just the surface level flavors. Like, when we drink this tea, even though the upfront flavors aren't as prominent, the qualities that this tea brings have a deeper characteristic. Meaning that when the tea is in your mouth, when the tea goes down your throat, and when the tea enters your body, that is where this tea shines. Alright? People drink puer tea not for flavor and fragrance, but they drink it for body feel. How does the tea feel in your mouth? How does the tea feel in your throat? How does the tea feel when it goes into your body and into your stomach? So, this is why we drink puer tea. Good puer tea should have a really complex mouthfeel. It goes into your mouth and it doesn't taste just like water. It fills all corners of your mouth. When we're describing it in Chinese, we usually say 饱满, like full. Like when you drink the tea, the tea fills the up, it fills the down part, the left, the right, the front, and the back. It's all in your mouth, and it feels very prominent. Now, we can also talk about once you swallow the tea gives you something back. You don't just swallow the tea and then the tea disappears. After you swallow the tea, there should be lingering sweetness in your mouth. A hui gan, right? A hui gan, senjing. Senjing means like salivation in your cheeks. The deeper the salivation, some people say, the older the tea is, the older the tree that the tea comes from. Those are all anecdotal concepts, but this is what a lot of people who drink puer will say. But you will get that feel from really good puer, good quality puer, that after you've swallowed the tea sort of stays in your mouth, lingering with sweetness and salivation in the cheeks. And then body feel. A lot of people these days are talking about cha qi, like the energy of the tea, right? Well, for me, I don't really go that deep. I mean, cha qi is a thing in here in Asia, but if you're not really in tune with your own body's qi, then I don't know how you would ever experience cha qi. But what you will experience is, does this tea make you feel relaxed? Is it soothing when it goes in your body? When you drink this tea, how does it make you feel? And for good quality pu'er, I think the greatest body feel we can get is almost like a focused relaxation. You sit there, you're drinking the tea, and then as the more of the tea substances enter into your body, you begin to feel more calm, more relaxed. Some people say they're sleepy, but I think you feel good. It's not. Some people will say, "Oh, I drink pu'er and it hits me like a brick." I mean, no, that's not the way gushu pu'er should make you feel. At least in my opinion. This is not like coffee where you're drinking tea for a jolt of energy. We're drinking tea to experience the tea itself, meaning all the minerals that the roots have soaked up, all the nutrients that the roots have taken up from the ground, drawn up through the trunks and into the leaves, and then when made into tea, you should feel that, and it should result in a soothing, relaxing body feel. Now, that kind of body feel really can only come from old trees. A lot of tea these days, they're made from, plantation bushes with very short roots. And so the nutrients doesn't really come from the ground per se. They come from fertilizer. And that's not specifically a bad thing, depending on the type of fertilizer you use, but you're not gonna get that deep body feel from short root tea trees that are artificially fertilized. This kind of deep, penetrating body feel can only be gotten by really old trees that are left to get nutrients on their own through their very deep roots in the ground. And so this is why people like pu'er. They want to feel that. They want to feel the environment. They want to feel the nutrients from the trees. And if the tea is legit from really old trees or old trees, you will get that at some level, depending on your sensitivity in your body. It's also these nutrients in these trees also give you the mouthfeel. So if you drink something like some tea made from small plantation bushes, and then you compare it to ancient tree pu'er tree, you can feel the difference in texture. There's a difference in texture. There's a difference in sweetness and huigan. All those things are different. It's indisputable. It's undisputable. Those teas will never be able to be in comparison in body feel and mouth feel to young raw pu'er made from old or ancient trees. So this is why we drink pu'er. It's not because we're impressed by the floral fragrance or the fruity aromas that maybe you can get from dancong, right? Or Taiwanese high mountain oolongs or yencha, right? We drink pu'er tea because it has a deeper connection with our body when we drink it. So I think when we drink raw pu'er, we should drink raw pu'er with this concept in our head. Because if we drink raw pu'er thinking it's going to be in comparison with oolong, we're always going to be disappointed. Because there's no way. Oolong is too flavorful and too fragrant. This tea can't compare. But oolong can't compare with the body feel of old tree, ancient tree raw pu'er. 100%. Unless you get those dancongs that are also made from gushu trees. Or you get those yencha made from the actual tree bushes that are growing on the Wuisan mountains, right? But those teas are super expensive. And so if you're just ordering online from a vendor that has, cheaper prices, you're probably not getting that. You will get that, nice, you will get teas that have nice floral fragrances. But that's because all tea makers now realize that a lot of tea drinkers don't like bitter flavors. They want high fragrance. They're just really looking at the surface level of the tea. So a lot of teas that you buy and then compare to young raw puerh, you'll say, hey, young raw puerh is not that special, or it's kind of bitter, right? Well, yeah, obviously, but it's because we don't drink these teas on the same thought process. Now, another thing I want to talk about is bitterness. Bitterness in young raw puerh. Unlike, let's say, Taiwanese high mountain oolong, where the processing really mitigates the bitterness of raw puerh. The bitterness of the tea. The processing of raw puerh does not. Their bitterness is inherent to puerh tea. The way it's processed, the way raw puerh tea is processed, it's impossible to get a raw puerh that is completely not bitter. All right? It's just not in the cards. Puerh tea, young raw puerh, and even some aged puerh will have bitterness on some level. Okay, but is bitterness really bad? That's the question. When I first started drinking tea, I didn't want any bitterness in a tea. Okay, I was always like, it's bitter, I don't want to drink it. But that's because I didn't really understand the nature of the teas that I was drinking. Yes, some were bad and some were just bitter and weren't good to drink. But like in the world of raw puerh and in tea in general, there is this idea of bad bitterness and good bitterness. Now, what does that mean? Good bitterness is when you drink the tea, you taste the bitterness, but then it fades away and then brings in sweetness. Meaning that the bitterness in the tea, after you swallow it, it returns, it has a huigan that is sweet. So you have a sweetness in your mouth that is brought by the bitterness. That in the tea world is good bitterness. And to be honest, that's with all teas, not just raw puerh, but raw puerh in particular. Bad bitterness is bitterness that when you drink the tea, just stays in your mouth and is very cloying. It's like it doesn't leave, it doesn't transform into sweet, just like really bitter and just stays in your mouth through the whole session and even after. That's bad bitterness, okay? Good raw puerh tea will have some bitterness, but the bitterness will fade fast and then it will bring back sweetness. This is the nature of puerh tea. You can't expect it to have something else, be something else. So when you think about puerh as being bitter, we got to think about it as this thing. Now, it might not be your cup of tea, excuse the pun, but that's the way it is. We can't say puerh is bad because it's bitter. We can only say puerh is bad because the bitterness, if it's bitter and it doesn't fade away and bring sweetness. If it's just cloying and just stays in your mouth and doesn't do anything but be bitter, then it's bad. Okay, that's the case where we can say it's bad, but puerh can't be claimed to be bad tea if it's bitter. We have to look at how it's bitter. Okay, there's a few sayings in Chinese tea culture, I guess. It's like, what is it? Ku jin, was it ku jin gan lai? Something like that. I hope I'm not messing up the tones there, but it basically means bitterness enters, sweetness returns, right? And there are a lot of people out there who think 不苦不涩不是茶, right? If it's not bitter, if it's not astringent, then it's not tea. Okay, so I think the older generation kind of looks for that in some cases. They're like, if it's not bitter, if it's not astringent, then it's not tea. Well, why do they say that? And in terms of pu'er, why is that? Because the bitterness and the astringency comes from polyphenols and catechins. So if there's abundance of polyphenols and catechins in the tea, there's a lot of substance to the tea in terms of raw pu'er, right? And so we want raw pu'er, we want to buy young raw pu'er that has a lot of substance. Why? Because young raw pu'er originally was made for storage and fermentation and meant to be drank later on in its life, meaning 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later. I have a friend that doesn't drink raw pu'er unless it's 10 years old. So if it's not bitter, if it's not astringent, it doesn't have substance, and then there's nothing to ferment into something better later. So that's why people who want bitterness and want astringency is because they know that brings with it substance within the tea leaf. If your tea leaf has no bitterness, has no astringency, then there's nothing for it to ferment into. And there's nothing for it to ferment into something better. There's no substance in the tea leaf. So, in that sense, bitterness and astringency isn't necessarily a bad thing in young raw pu'er. Once again, it's just like when we drink the tea, does the bitterness and does the astringency fade away fast? Or does it stay cloyingly in your mouth? If it's the former, it's good. If it's the latter, it's bad. Okay? So we got to think about that. Okay? So when we go and drink a tea like this, a young raw pu'er tea, we got to think what we may think as the bad qualities of the tea, what are they actually, right? And if you don't like it, you don't like it. This tea at the very end is all subjective. It's to your taste. You're the one paying the money for it. You're the one drinking it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But we got to understand what the tea has. Why you don't like the tea. And is that thing, why you don't like it, necessarily bad? And I think some of us just put off pu'er because they've had so many bad examples of pu'er tea in the past. I mean, there's a lot of pu'er out there that's just awful. All this wet storage pu'er, this wet storage kind of concept people have, that's just bad pu'er, all right? Wet storage pu'er, unless it's been properly stored where the wet storage technique is correct and then has been reseeded from the tea, wet storage pu'er is just bad pu'er, And so there's a lot of that on the market because it's cheap. It's cheap because it's pu'er that's gone bad, but the sellers don't want to throw it away, so they sell it to people and try to convince people that it's good tea. All right? But it's not. So we can't. So there's a whole other, level of drinking pu'er, but it's just that, I forgot kind of what I was going on. I kind of went off on a tangent, but yeah. So don't let the bad examples out there ruin your perception of the good examples. That's what I'm saying in the end. So yeah, I could say more, but I think we'll end it here. Thanks for listening. If you want to check out some of the teas that I have, you can go to the link in the description box. And yeah, see you guys in the next session. Later.